All right, let's get into this now. So the alternate pathways to financial aid. All right, this is something that you have a lot of students across the state that may not be eligible for the FAFSA, but they still would like to apply for state aid. Well, we have some programs for them. If you were in our trainings last week, we mentioned these, and I said we're going to deeper depth with those, and here we are. So today we're going to cover is the alternate pathways. What are they? Like, how do you get aid from New York State without being a conventional FAFSA recipient? We're also going to explain pieces and elements of that process. First, the pre-screening statements. This is something new to help students determine which application is best for them. We're going to review the eligibility applications for the DREAM Act and the alternate eligibility pathway. One thing I'm going to keep saying when I go through this presentation is that the DREAM Act and alternate eligibility pathways are not financial aid applications. They are doorways, along with the FAFSA, to prove that they meet the requirements for TAP. So there's 3 doorways to get TAP, but the FAFSA is one that we covered already, but the DREAM Act and the All Paths are the other 2 that we'll cover today. Then I'm going to explain the TAP application that these students will have to submit. It is generally the same as the typical traditional TAP application, but there are some big differences or ways that students may get stuck if they don't understand what's happening that can be a barrier to students. There's also an update to how we process DREAM Act things and how we process education requirements for the DREAM Act that we are really excited about, that you guys will be updated on as well. All right, so those that are new, those are welcome in. I'm going to get you a link to the PowerPoint so you have it. It's probably the last time I do it for a while, so I don't have to keep going back and forth. All right, so to get you guys kind of centered around the kinds of students that these applications and the pathways available for multiple situations, I'm going to give you 4 scenarios. Now, in these scenarios, do not answer them, right? At this point, you probably won't know which is best for which, and that's okay. So don't answer the scenarios as we go through it. But after the first half of this training, we're going to review these scenarios again to see if you can dictate which application is going to be best for which student. All right, so I'm going to say I don't answer them yet, but you will have a chance to answer them later on in the chat. So scenario 1, Jared moved to New York 3 years ago from California. He attended high school for 3 years as a variant in Brooklyn. Jared's parents both work in Brooklyn and are U.S. citizens. We're going to see which application may be best for Jared. Now, scenario number 2, we have a student, Brittany. Brittany is a New York resident. Her parents recently decided to move to North Carolina to care for an elderly parent before Brittany graduates from high school. But Brittany's going to stay back and graduate from high school in New York. Both her parents are U.S. citizens, and we're going to see which application is going to be best for Brittany. Then we have Rocco. Rocco was born and raised in New York. After graduating high school, he worked for 2 years before attending college. During that time, Rocco got married. Rocco had to begin attending college. He is a U.S. citizen, but his spouse is not. All right. And our last scenario is Pietro. Pietro arrived in New York last year. He is a Ukrainian citizen who had to leave home due to the war. He is currently in temporary protected status, but has work authorization SSN. We're going to find out which application may be best for Pietro in this instance. All right. So they're going as 3 pathways, all right? 3 pathways to financial aid in New York State now. If you were part of our supporting students through their FAFSA training that we had on, I think, Wednesday, you would know about the FAFSA TAP pathway for FAFSA filers, with also the DREAM Act and the ALT path. Just as a quick review for the FAFSA TAP pathway, students must complete the FAFSA, which, if you haven't heard, is open right now. It opened last week. They're really excited about it. Their fastest opening, the earliest opening ever. So really excited about that. Now, as a word of warning, we put out some social media stuff last week, and we're going to continue to pump out some more social media today and tomorrow. But students should be aware, although the FAFSA is open, the TAP application does not open until Wednesday, October 1st. Okay, so although the FAFSA is open, there will be a link to state aid, to the state aid page, to the TAP page. But that link, 1, will not populate FAFSA information, and 2, will just go to our landing page that just says, hey, we open October 1st, come back October 1st and fill out your application. if you have students that say, hey, I went on right after the FAFSA when it first opened and I filled out a TAP application, but I haven't heard anything yet. Those students most likely filled out, well, not most likely, definitely filled out the 25-26 application and not the 26-27 application. So work with those students to just go back in and complete the 26-27 application. Now, the next one we have here is the DREAM pathway. We'll talk about in depth, but this is a pathway that essentially allows students who may not meet the sufficient requirements for FAFSA to meet other requirements as well as educational requirements to be eligible for New York State aid. This is also a pathway that students who are no longer New York State residents, but maybe have been and their parents were here to still be able to get state aid. And then alt path. This is primarily for applicants who meet the citizenship requirements for FAFSA, but do not wish to file due to privacy concerns for their parent or spouse. Okay, we'll talk more about that. So the question is going to be, which application is right for each student? With this, it used to be at ISTS when students were filling out the DREAM Act, there's only one path. There's only one application. Now on that same site, there are two pathways. So we have to figure out which pathway the student should take. So now we've introduced these what's called pre-screening statements. These are 3 statements that will dictate which application a student should fill out. So you'll see here that there's hyperlinks to our program pages. So if a student is not aware of the actual requirements for the DREAM Act, for the alternate pathway, or for FAFSA, they can go and look at those hyperlinks and bring up those pages, and it'll have the requirements for citizenship, the education requirements for each one, and kind of point them to where they should go. So the first one is I'm eligible to apply for the New York State financial aid under the Jose Peralta DREAM Act. Students that select that will go down the pathway to fill out the DREAM Act eligibility application and apply for state aid after they're accepted into that DREAM Act program. The next one is I'm a New York State resident and can apply for FAFSA, but opted out due to privacy concerns for family members. Choosing that statement will send them down the pathway for the alternate eligibility pathway, right? So they'll be verified through that way, and then when they're approved, they'll be able to apply for state aid through that program. And then I'm a New York State resident and I'm willing to complete the FAFSA using my family members' information. Students like that will actually be directed to go fill out the FAFSA, right? That is the best way for students to maximize the amount of financial aid they can receive to go to college. Alternate eligibility pathway students, although they're eligible for FAFSA, they're choosing to forego that federal grant money, so they won't not get the most financial aid, but that may be what's best for certain families in certain situations. Students will be asked to confirm that they're choosing that selection before moving forward. Now, it's really important to note that once they choose one of these pathways, they must fill out either DREAM Act or alt path. They must fill out the actual application for that pathway. So they're kind of stuck in that lane, in that pathway, once they choose it. Now, if a student chooses that pathway incorrectly, they'll be denied for that program, whether it's the DREAM Act or alt path. But if they realize, oh no, I actually filled out the wrong application, they can work with ISTS to remove that application and then to come back and try to the other pathway. We really suggest that students don't go back and forth, that they really truly vet which program is best for who and look at those requirements for eligibility before confirming their selection. For those of you that just joined recently, here's the link to the PowerPoint that you can download and get going, and you can get all the links there. All right. We do have a guide for this, right? So we do have some literature on this where we do realize that this is new for a lot of the state. So we have some resources on the pre-statement, the path determination statements. So if you go to this link that I'm proud to provide for FAFSA ready trainings and hit the alternate pathways to financial aid, the second portion of that page is going to be resources, and there's a path determination guide that helps students understand citizenship requirements and other requirements for each selection, and then what they should provide going forward. So now let's talk about the DREAM Act, right? This is something that you guys are aware of that has been around for quite some time, so there's nothing new on the DREAM Act. The DREAM Act is a pathway for students who do not meet citizenship or residency requirements for FAFSA TAP pathway. So if the student is or isn't if it's not a legal resident of New York State, they may want to choose this pathway. They have to get meet all the eligibility requirements for this pathway. We do actually have a full walkthrough video of this application on the FAFSA Ready training page, and the link there will take you to that YouTube video. Now, when a student creates an account for the DREAM Act, they simply have to go on, hit register, and then put in an email. When we talk about email, we refer them to use a personal email. Some students like to use their high school email because it maybe sounds more professional, or their college email because it sounds more professional, or things like that. But the reality is, if they were to change colleges or when they graduate high school, they'll still need access to this email because this is what ISTS is going to use to coordinate any changes with the student. This is how we make contact with the student. So the email should be a personal email. And then they have to enter a password and then confirm that password and their date of birth. Just like everything else, the student should know their date of birth. Unlike FAFSA, who like kind of has a degree of a derivative in that, where they can go a couple more days or less days. The birthday has to be correct on the tab on an ISTS site. So students that have issues with the birth date have to work with ISTS to correct the birth date. Now, the DREAM Act has a few requirements. First is eligibility. So the first eligibility requirement is citizenship. It must have a TRU visa, be in temporary protected status, and even now there's some changes happening with that. So that list is populated per year, and based on what the government has allowed for these statuses, they may change. So some countries may be added to this list, and some countries may be taken off at different times. Deferred act for childhood arrival without lawful immigration status, right, which may include undocumented students. And then U.S. citizens who are eligible or eligible non-citizens whose permanent home is outside of New York State. So they're a U.S. citizen, but their permanent home is outside of New York State. They may be eligible for the DREAM Act, but they also have to be verified on these educational requirements as well. So the educational requirements for the DREAM Act are as such. They must have graduated from a high school in New York State, having attended for 2 or more full years, right? So all the junior year and all their senior year, they have to attended high school in New York State and graduate. Now, they could also hold a New York State high school equivalency diploma, so that would work for students. Now, there's some students that get here, they're about to graduate high school, and they don't want to get a GED, and they want to be able to graduate, but they won't have those 2 years. For those students, they can apply for the DREAM Act and meet the educational requirements if they're being charged in-state tuition at a SUNY or CUNY for a reason other than New York State residency. Now, with these, I want to mention that we have to verify these things with students before they're eligible for the DREAM Act. Now, until the student is eligible for the DREAM Act, they cannot apply for New York State aid. So the first step is DREAM Act. So if a student has to wait until they get in-state tuition and get that bill and give it to us, they have to wait until that time, which is usually in the semester, to apply for the DREAM Act. Hold on, gotta sneeze. It's gone. I hate when that happens. It's gone. All right. So they must be in state. It must be going to school in state first, getting in-state tuition, and then apply for the DREAM Act. And then once they're approved, then apply for TAP. So this does create some time that it takes, and students may have to pay some college tuition first and then get reimbursed later on to get into the DREAM Act. In years after that, they can just keep applying for aid. All right, so those are the citizenship and educational requirements. Now, students that are in the DREAM Act also have to apply to college for undergraduate studies within 5 years of graduating. So somebody's a DREAM Act eligible applicant, they apply, they go to high school, they get into the DREAM Act, but then they wait 6, 7, 8 years, whatever may happen, to apply to actually go to college. Then those students are ineligible for the DREAM Act, but they're now ineligible. So you have to go to school within 5 years and then 10 years for graduate studies, right? So here's how students apply for the DREAM Act. You may not have seen this before, but in this, we're going to have screenshots on the eligibility applications. We're also going to walk through the TAP application as a whole as well. So here's what the pre-application may look like for students. We're looking for really concrete information to understand if they meet the citizenship requirements and the high school education requirements to be eligible for the DREAM Act. So this first page, we're asking for if they're doing undergraduate versus graduate studies and what year they first enrolled in those studies. Remember, it's a 5-year window. So if a student is first enrolling 5 years after graduation of high school, they're not going to be eligible for the DREAM Act, okay? And then for what school year are you looking for aid? That's just the calendar year. If it's 2006, 2007, or 24, 25. Also be mindful that because the DREAM Act and Alt Path are not actual financial aid applications, these are open all year. Students do not have to wait until the 26-27 TAP application opens to apply for the DREAM Act. They can apply for the DREAM Act right now so that when the TAP opens, they can hopefully be eligible and approved to apply for TAP. So these are open year round. So if you have students that even are juniors that are going to be graduating next year, part of that process at the end of their junior year or early senior year can be getting into the DREAM Act and applying for eligibility and then getting it ready so that they can apply for TAP right away when TAP opens. All right. We're also going to ask for high school details. Right. What would your status in college be at the beginning of the school year? Right, whether it's freshman, sophomore, so on and so forth. Next thing we'll ask is for the high school education details. All right. And then we'll ask for their citizenship status. So be mindful here. These are really important, especially the citizenship status, because once somebody hits submit to those answers, they cannot go back to that pre-application until after the application is processed. And it's important because when they pick a high school status or a citizenship status, we need to verify all of that. And we'll ask for documentation. So for instance, we may ask for an I-797 form for some of these students. If they pick the wrong status, they won't have the right document that we're looking for. And then they have to submit incorrect documentation, be denied, or go through processing, and then we have to be able to fix it later. So once again, accurate information, taking the time, even getting documentation ahead of time to review it to make sure that they're putting the correct citizenship status is really important. Once they go through the pre-application, they'll end up here at the actual DREAM Act eligibility application. They'll have to put their first and last name. Now, this is also really important because whatever name they put here is the name that we work with SED to figure out if they're actually if they meet the high school graduation requirements. So students must put their first and last name as it appears on their high school records. Now, we realize this may be confusing for some students. The same thing happens with TAP when we ask for a name from the tax return, not what it currently is. We need their name on their high school records. Okay, if they go by Gus, but on the high school records is something different, we need the name on the high school records to make sure that it matches up with the state education department. The date of birth will also be there. And then if there are known by other name, whether it's on the birth certificate, whether it's on documentation like a passport or things like that, they can enter any other legal names they have on documentation right at the bottom there. They'll also be asked to enter things like their date of birth and not their date of birth, but their mailing address. They can elect to receive notifications via phone number. We don't typically use that other than extreme cases. We usually and typically interact with students via their email address. Okay. Then we ask that they have a bachelor's degree when they begin the school year. Your high school students will not have a bachelor's degree, but some of your college students will. So make sure they select that correctly. And then their grade level, never attended college first year, second year, things like that, upperclassmen. And then are you a high school senior graduate within the class of this year, we'll say 25 and 26. Okay. Now, here's the thing that gets most people, right? Here's the thing that we get a lot of questions on when it pertains to high school verification, right? There's two ways that students can verify their high school graduation status. The first is an automatic verification through New York State Education Department. Now, there's a drop down where students can select their high school. Now, some charter schools and private schools are not on that list. So if that is your student, they will have to manually verify. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But students that want to automatically verify should make sure their name is correct as it appears on high school records, but then also select the right high school. And if they know their ID, they can put their ID there. Okay. There's also some questions here about the possibility of if they're a candidate for some of the opportunity programs like EOP, HEOP, and SEEK, if they're going to receive certain scholarships. That doesn't have any bearing on their actual eligibility for the Dream Act or All Path, but it gives us a better idea of what else might be coming down the pike for the student. Now, I mentioned the verification process. This is something we got a lot of questions on when it comes to high school graduation status. Now, the first is students can opt for either one. And if they opt for automatic, they can still do manual verification if they want. Automatic is done through SAD. Manual verification in years past has been that students must have an official transcript with their graduation day listed on it in order to pass the eligibility requirements for the Dream Act. Now, we realize and recognize that was a barrier for some students because they couldn't get that documentation until June or May, June, and that was late because they wanted to apply for aid and get their award packages with everybody else in April or May. So now we have updated that procedure. So if you're a high school counselor, which I hope a lot of you are, you can send in a transcript with the graduation date typed on it. So if it's, obviously now and your anticipated graduation date is, end of May in 26, a counselor or office administrator can type anticipated graduation date, June 2nd, 2026, and we will take that documentation as verification. Now, we will not take it handwritten. So if it's handwritten in pencil, pen, crayon, marker, we will not be taking it. It has to be typed onto the document. All right. But that's something that we foresee being a huge help to students. So now they can be proactive and getting that documentation to us faster. And then they can be eligible to apply for aid and get their award packages way sooner than July, August, when most enrollment is being tied up. Now, after this, there's going to be a list of different documents that students may need. So for instance, for some students without status, we may be asking them if their parent or them have some documentation, like for instance, their I-797 form, which may be undocumented, or they're without lawful status, or they're pending lawful status. The I-797 form might be helpful to us, but we want them to redact certain information like their street address and possibly their parents' names, right? So if you notice earlier, we asked for their mailing address, not their actual home address, okay? We just need a mailing address. We don't need their actual street address. So I hope that answers your question. Those that asked, that's just some of the documentation we're looking for. And the application will populate that list for each status type. Right, so if you're a T or U visa, DACA, it will populate whatever documentation is needed for those different types right there. And then students can use, Microsoft Word or Adobe to redact certain information that we don't need to process that application, such as SSN, TIN, or mailing address or parents' names. Right, so they have to upload documentation for it to process. This application will not be complete until all the documentation needed is submitted, right, and uploaded. Once that happens, then we can move forward. Students that are stuck here and aren't able to supply that information or don't have any documentation to supply will be stuck in this status until they at least upload something to be processed, whether it's denied or accepted, and then we can work with that student afterwards. They do get an email notification. Hey, don't forget to upload your documents. Come on, upload your documents. Don't forget. So you do get email notifications. I want to say every 14 days or so to get that information to us. Applications usually take up to 2 weeks to process. Sometimes it's sooner, depending on the volume of applications that we're getting. So just a quick recap of the DREAM Act. The eligible requirements are at HESC.ny.gov/dream. They can apply there as well. They have to create an account. They can hit add new application and select the correct pre-screening statement, which is I'm eligible to apply under the Jose Peralta DREAM Act, and then submit their DREAM Act application. After they're approved for their application, they can go back in and submit their TAP application, and then review and accept that award once it's been approved. After that's been approved, they can continue to apply for other state-sponsored aid like Excelsior, STEM, and other applications through that same portal. We really stress that students should check their email address as much as possible, so that we're usually sending correspondence to them pretty regularly to make sure that they're aware of the application status, or if they're missing something. Like there was a big thing with IVP last year. We were coordinating with students, and our special populations coordinator, Natasha Torres, was working really hard to get those students through and work with ISCS to make sure the issue was resolved. So we do communicate a lot through email. So that's the DREAM Act. Now this new alternate pathway that you guys may have heard about. Here's how this works. This is for students who are citizens, but their parent or spouse is not a U.S. citizen or permanent resident, or they're not a legal resident of New York, okay? This will allow students to apply for New York State aid without submitting the FAFSA. So notice who this is for. This is not for students who just want to forego their parents' information on an application. This is for students who we still need parent information for this application. So they can't just say, I don't want to get my parents' information and go through. I do not have a worksheet on the types of document per status. That's not going to work on, Rebecca. So if you need a document on some of these things, like what kind of statuses are there, what information is needed, on the survey afterwards, I would really appreciate, there's a question about what other documents or resources can we provide. Can you please provide that information? I actually keep a track of that, and I'm going to start creating documents in the next week or so to introduce into FRT to help with that. So if there are those kind of things, please put that in the survey at the end of this training so that we can get to work on those different resources. But that's a great idea, Rebecca. Thank you. All right, so this is the pathway. So we'll start with the application. Just like the DREAM Act, there is a pre-application. This application is much shorter because these students have citizenship, and we can verify that pretty easily. So they should enter their citizenship status, their social security number or TIN number, the level of study, and their residency. Make sure they're resident. This should say for the full 25. It'll be for this year, the full 2025 calendar year. Once they submit the information here, the citizenship status, the social security number, please make sure it's correct. Please, if they have an SSN or even a TIN, please make sure it's correct. It does take a lot of work to get this corrected, and does create a barrier for students, but it's something that we can't dictate. So please don't make an unforeseen and unnecessary error delay students in getting financial aid. Right. So confirm those things, and then once they hit submit here, they won't be able to go back and change anything here until after the application has processed, just like the DREAM Act. After that, we're going to ask for the first and last name, right? And then the date of birth will be grayed out and populated here. If there is something missing, right, there's a wrong month, date, year, they will need to contact ISTS to get help by sending them documentation for that date of birth. You'll see a phone number here. We've actually removed that phone number from all of our documentation. That phone number is no longer in use. And the best way, honestly, is through the email, right? It gives students a track of what's being done, and it allows ISTS to actually give way better responses through the email than the chat box or previously the phone, right? So that is the place that you should be sending students to correct anything on these applications. Now, students should include any of the legal names used. And notice here, we're also asking for country, city, state, and zip code. We're not asking for their home address here. We may ask for their mailing address later on, but not their street address. They can also enter any information that's needed as far as phone numbers, and any notification they want via emails will be sent there. They'll then be asked to select whether they have a bachelor's degree at the beginning of the academic year. So if they have a bachelor's degree by 26-27 or not. And then just like the DREAM Act application, any supporting documents that are necessary will be populated here, right? And that just depends on their status they take, right? Birth certificate, passport, permanent resident card, things like that. Just like the DREAM Act, they have to sign and consent, and then within 2 weeks or so, their application will be processed and approved for the alternate pathway. Okay, once again, this is for students who they may have a parent or spouse who is a FAFSA contributor, but they do not want to interact with the federal government to give that information. So they instead will forego that federal aid and then be able to apply for only state aid as a way of privacy concerns for their family. All right. So just a quick overview, just like TAP, or just like DreamAct, they'll go through the process, submit their alt path application. When they're approved in 2 weeks or denied, they can come back in, make adjustments, or apply for TAP that way. They can accept their TAP award and then apply for other financial aid there, such as STEM. If you notice, Excelsior is not here. So I hope everybody's listening real quick. If you're zoned out, that's okay. It's online training, I get it. But this is, you got to pay attention here because it's really important. And this is something that, because this is so new with the alternate pathway, there are a lot of nuances that we're yet to see, but we're trying to be proactive in how we rectify some of these. So students that are eligible under the DREAM Act can apply for TAP, STEM, Excelsior, ETA, and other grants and scholarships, pretty much anything else that we have on the table. Students that are eligible under the alternate pathway, that does include part-time TAP. Yep, that includes part-time TAP. Students that are eligible under the alternate pathway are eligible for all of our programs except for Excelsior and the Enhanced Tuition Award. Now, other than TAP, Excelsior is probably our biggest application. So the reason why the students that are going through the alternate pathway are not eligible for Excelsior or ETAs, because the way the legislation is written, DREAM Act applicants are not FAFSA eligible, right? They do not meet the citizenship requirements for the FAFSA. Alternate eligibility applicants are FAFSA eligible. They are U.S. citizens or eligible non-citizens. They're choosing this pathway because of privacy concerns for their parent or spouse who is not a U.S. citizen or permanent resident. So these students are FAFSA eligible, and they're electing to not fill out the FAFSA because of those privacy concerns. The way the legislation is written, if you're eligible for FAFSA, you must apply for FAFSA and TAP to receive Excelsior or an Enhanced Tuition Award. So that is why these students will not be eligible for Excelsior. They're essentially eligible for FAFSA, but are choosing not to fill out the FAFSA. Now, I don't think it's something that we could have accounted for when these legislations were written. So that's unfortunate. Something to be mindful of. Okay, something to be mindful of is that this is new, and this is a choice for every family. We are not prescribing students who are U.S. citizens, but their parent or spouse is not. We're not saying you have to fill out the alternate pathway. Those students have a choice. They can say, you know what, I'm not going to do that right now. I don't feel safe doing that in front of the FAFSA. I feel safe with New York State, so I'm going to apply for their aid only. They can change their mind. So a student who fills out the alternate pathway and goes in, gets TAP, goes for a year and is like, man, that was rough. I have to work double time, school, I was getting no sleep, right? I can't afford to keep doing this and working so hard and try to keep my grades up. So a student that is eligible for the all path, goes to the all path all year, and then decides next year, listen, I got to go get FAFSA. They can do that. They can get FAFSA the next year. And if that same student also is getting Excelsior as a sophomore, and then a junior year, they're like, you know what, I'm doing the all path only, was not eligible for Excelsior. If that senior year student was like, you know what, I got to get Excelsior, like I got to get more funding, I can't do that again. As long as they continue to be enrolled, and as long as they continue to meet that 30 credit requirement per year for Excelsior, they can come back into Excelsior as well. So it's the one time that somebody cannot get Excelsior and then come back into the program later on is if they're on the alternate eligible pathway and change their mind. The same can happen even this year. So you might have a student that files for the alt pathway, gets tapped through the alt pathway, and then down the road is like, I need some Pell. Like, this isn't going to work. I got to get Pell. The student should not redo their TAP application. By that point, the TAP is already probably processed. They shouldn't redo that. But they can go ahead and fill out the FAFSA after that and then get the retroactive aid if they would like to. All right, so like I said, it's a little bit muddy because it's new, but there is some flexibility for those alternate eligibility applicants to, if they change their mind, go back and get FAFSA. If they change their mind and want to come back to Excelsior later on, they can come back and get Excelsior after that year, as long as they continue to stay enrolled and as long as they continue to have 30 credits towards their degree per year. Okay. I'm going to stop real quick right there Let me know what questions you got. I'm sure there's something. That was a lot. Let me know any questions you got. Or I'm just that good and I explained it really well. I'm saying I'm good. I explained it really well. If you have more questions, we'll get back to it after this. All right. So let's go. Remember those scenarios we did earlier? Some of you may have missed the scenarios, but these scenarios we're going to talk about for students, and then I want you guys to throw in the chat which application would be best for each student. All right. So I'm going to go through the scenarios again, and then we're going to try and help each student determine which application may be best for them. All right. Here we go. Scenario number one: Jared moved to New York 3 years ago from California. He attended high school for 3 years as a variant in Brooklyn. Jared's parents both work in Brooklyn and are U.S. citizens. Tell me in the chat which application is best for Jared. So we got a FAFSA in there. We got TAP. We got FAFSA TAP. Flannery, the regular process. Good. Stephanie, excellent. Okay, all right, Megan, Caleb, Michelle. We're pouring in. Rocky, my man, Rocky. All right. Yeah, you guys are on point. All right, y'all know what you're doing. So this student is eligible for the FAFSA TAP application, right? So they're U.S. citizens, parents are U.S. citizens, the New York State residents. They check all the boxes for the FAFSA TAP pathway. Really good job. All right. How about scenario number two? All right. Brittany is a New York State resident. Her parents recently decided to move to North Carolina to care for an elderly parent before Brittany graduates from high school. Brittany will stay back and graduate from high school in New York. Brittany's parents are both U.S. citizens. Tell me which application is right for Brittany. Okay, Lori. I see a dream. KN Dream. All right, Fiona. I see you. Brandy. All right. Genevieve. I see you. I see you there, Genevieve. All right. I see a lot of FAFSA TAP. So, in essence, something to think about. For TAP, if you guys don't know much about TAP yet, for TAP, a student has to be a New York State resident. Much like FAFSA, if a student's parents, if a student dependent, like Brittany is, and her parents live outside of New York State, their state of legal residence moves with their parents. So Brittany's state of residence is now in North Carolina because her parents just moved. Now, through the FAFSA TAP pathway, they can't complete the FAFSA, but when she applies for TAP, we're going to flag her for residency because she is no longer a New York State resident. But she would have graduated from high school after attending for 2 or more years at New York State. So she would actually be eligible for the FAFSA, but also the DREAM Act. She is, yes, that's why I'm here, Flannery. That's why I'm here. This is a big piece of the DREAM Act. The students who, because let's face it, life happens. So we have students that may have lived in New York State their whole life and then moved out, who their parents had to move for whatever. They retired, they want to go to Florida, they want to go to Montana. So the DREAM Act will allow those students whose parents moved out of New York, but Brittany decided to stay. Maybe she lived with an aunt or uncle, but her parents still have parental concern and right over her. Now she's eligible to apply for the DREAM Act, right? She's a U.S. resident, U.S. citizen whose permanent home is outside of New York State, but she also meets the eligibility requirements for education. She's graduating from New State High School after applying for 2 or more years. All right, so FAFSA DREAM Act. All right, so hopefully you learn something. That's why we do the scenarios. So now you can wrap your mind around it. And now, Patricia, now we know. All right. Next one, my man Rocco. Rocco was born and raised in New York. After graduating high school, he, not her, he worked for 2 years before attending college. In that time, Rocco got married. Oh, watch out. Whoa, watch out. Rocco had to begin attending college. He is a U.S. citizen, but his spouse is not. Which application should Rocco fill out? FAFSA alternate. All right. Alternate, FAFSA TAP or alternate. All right. What else? I think everybody nervous now to answer. They're like, oh, I don't want to get it wrong, right? So Maria says FAFSA, FAFSA alt. Great question, Chris. I love that question because that is it, right? That is it. So Chris said, does he have privacy concerns? And that's the question, right? So for the presentation, we're going to say alternate pathway, right? Let's say Rocco has privacy concerns. But I love how Chris stated that because you really need to work with that student, and it's a really important conversation for that student to have with his spouse, right, or their parents as a family to say which is best for us. Should I go get the FAFSA? Do we need that money? Are you cool with that? Are you comfortable with that? Or should we say, no, let's not do the FAFSA, let's do the alternate pathway? Now, some of you guys did say FAFSA and alternate pathway. Now, can a student fill out the FAFSA and the alternate pathway? They could, right? They could. It really wouldn't make sense because most of the time the student is doing it for privacy concerns because they don't want to give their information to the Department of Education. But I was also said that they can flip-flop, right? If they realize like I cannot afford this without this aid, I got to maximize as much money as I can get to get this degree. And the family says, you know what, go for it. They can go from all path and then fill out the FAFSA. This is part of the confusion, but it's also pretty solid. It gives them the choice as to how much they want to actually apply for, whether it's federal or just state. Also remembering that they will not be eligible for Excelsior. All right, really good. All right, and then the last one. Pietro arrived in New York last year. He's a Ukrainian citizen who had to leave home due to the war. He is currently in temporary protected status, but has a work authorization SSN. Which application is best for this student? Boom, they're flying in now. All right, Renee, Megan, yep, Stacy there. Brandy's back, yep. All right, Natalie, all right. Maria, Patricia, a lot of dreams happening. Great. Yep, you guys are on point. This is a Dream Act student, right? And this is the student is in temporary protected status. That's really all we need to know. As long as we know he's in temporary protected status, he should be eligible for the Dream Act. This is his day now for him. Eligibility as far as education may be at play here, right? So remember, he arrived in New York last year. If he's a senior, right, in high school, he will only be in New York for 1 year, which means he won't have the 2 years of high school. So he could get a GED, or he could wait until in-state tuition kicks in and then apply to meet education requirements that way. But the Dream Act would be the best route for this student. All right. Any questions on those scenarios? Any questions on those different pathways? Before we move on to the actual TAP application that students will submit on this platform. So international students that are on just a student visa are not eligible for the Dream Act. So they're here just for school, like they're coming just for like a international student school, just for schooling? No. Dream GED requested. What does that mean? Y'all can give me more information on that. So a great question. We have a senior only here for 1 year. What's their best pathway? So there's multiple pathways. They will not be eligible because of that. They need 2 years. So they get a regular high school diploma. That won't suffice the 2-year mark, right? So that student could get a GED, right, instead, and forego their senior year, just get a GED. I don't know a high school senior that wants to forego the senior year. They want to do all the stuff, right? So the other way that they can meet the education requirements is as they must go to a SUNY or CUNY school, right? Their first year, go to SUNY or CUNY and receive in-state tuition. If they receive in-state tuition at a SUNY or CUNY school, that will be their education requirement and they'll be able to supply the documentation. Now, the drawback here is they have to wait until that bill comes with the in-state tuition on it to get that to us to then have that requirement be satisfied. So it may not be till later on or close to the school year or early in the school year before we can get that documentation and get them through the process. But it is an avenue that student can use. Good questions, y'all. I knew there would be some good questions on this one. Like I knew that. I was ready for it. I almost had Natasha, our special populations coordinator, on this training, but she was not available today. But she promised to get in on another one. So let's talk about this application, right? Who is seeing the actual TAP application to the ISTS site? Because if you didn't know, it's actually much different. It looks different than what's on the traditional site. Okay. Oh, this is a good question. Let me get to this thing first, right? Put these questions you have here in the Q&A panel. I appreciate that. They're giving you a better record so when the chat flows, it can still flow. So Patricia, Stephanie, please put those questions in the Q&A panel. So we're right next to the chat button. And that way I can keep a record of them and not miss them at the end. I want to get through this and make sure I get everybody enough time to get back to the workday. All right. So please, Stephanie, Patricia, use that Q&A panel. I would appreciate it. All right, so let's go to the TAP application because there's some slight differences and there's some pain points here that may allow the student to get stuck in this application and not know what to do next. So here's how you can help them. So the first thing is anything from that first Dream Act eligibility application or all path application we pre-populated here. Things like name, last name, and then mailing address. We populated right there, pre-populated. You'll also be able to select any notifications there as well. Now, when we ask about their college, they want to select a college they want to attend. When they enter their student ID, if they have one, they should make sure that they're entering the ID as is. Do not put in like SUNY and then the ID or CUNY then the ID. Just put in the ID as it is, or they can come back later on and enter that information later on if they don't have it right then and there. They don't not need to enter the college name on the bottom and the top, just on the student ID there. Now, this dependency flow mirrors a lot of what we do for TAP, but TAP will allow students to go through and be provisionally independent pending documentation, whereas this application does not. If a student does not accurately answer these questions, they will not be able to get you and go any further, and I'll show you how that works. So students who are in foster care or ward of the court or an orphan after the age of 13 should select it here on the dependency questions. That's the first thing to select. Students who select that foster care will not need to enter parent information. They'll be independent and be able to move forward through the application without having any parent interaction at all, right? If that doesn't apply to these students, they can hit none of the above. Now, the other question here is if they were, just like they did for TAP, there is information for the foster youth, orphan, and ward of the court status verification form for OCFS for an additional bucket of funds for those students. The next question is, what will your application's dependency status be? This year will say 25 and 26. Now, in that case, they can select independent, I live with parents, receive more than $750 from my parents, or was claimed as a dependent by my parent or step parent or adoptive parent. The adoptive parent, once again, is if it was adoptive parent before the age of 13, right? So if they're in foster care all after 13, they should select that and become independent. Now, students will want to be independent without a special condition, so without being a foster care, foster youth, ward of the court, anything like that. They'll want to be independent. So they'll select none of the above. And then what will happen is our application will provide more questions, such as this one up top. Is this applicant an honorably discharged from the active military status? We're going to ask a bunch of questions to see if they're of age to be independent or if there's a special condition or something at play to make them independent. And if not, they're going to get stuck, right? So let's say they say none of the above here, right? They want to be independent. None of the above is here. They're not military, and they weren't in foster care or from the ward of court after 13. We're going to ask more questions. Like, did you have one or more dependents as of December 31st, 2024? For this year, it'll be 2025. If the answer is yes, then they could say then a person will be the independent student. If the answer is no, we're going to ask some more questions to determine their financial independence. Now we're going to ask, are you over 22? If the answer is no here, right, or they're under 22, we're going to ask more questions, like if you're going to be married after a specific date. So if the student is married before December 31st, 2025 this year, then they'll be an independent student. But instead of they're single, they're under 22. Then the last thing they'll see before they get stuck is this question. And this is where a lot of students get stuck. what describes or will describe your dependency status as of June 30th, 2025. This will say 26 for the new application. Both my parents were totally and permanently disabled. Both my parents were declared incompetent. My family is dissolved, right? Meaning my parents no longer have rights or responsibility to me. This could also be for those students who are in legal guardianship. They can select that as well. And that will provide documentation through legal guardianship. And then they can do either I will receive or be receiving public assistance. And this is not as a dependent on your parents. These are the same special conditions that we have for other TAP students that are applying to the FAFSA TAP pathway. The difference is the students can select none of those and then move forward. Here, they have to select one. And notice that none of the above is not an option here. This is where students get stuck because they can't move forward at all until they either select one of those or they go back up to the top and change one of those answers, meaning they live with their parents, meaning they're getting more aid from their parents, or they're tax dependent on their parents, right? So they have to change one of those answers in order to move forward if none of these applies to the student. Like I said, there's no provisional option here like there is for traditional FAFSA TAP pathway. They can go through this and then provide documentation and we'll deny them later on. But here they have to go through the whole process beforehand. Now, reporting income. Based on the population of students, we ask slightly different questions because some of the students, remember, are not, their parents are not legal residents of New York State. They may be residents of other states, like North Carolina or Florida or Montana, and their students stayed here. So we ask for their filing status and then what state their custodial parent filed their tax return in. So if they filed in New York State, we'll be asking for net taxable income. If they filed in Florida, North Carolina, other states, we'll actually ask for their their AGI. We'll ask for their federal tax information because that's what they have available. All right. So each parent's name must be put in like it is on their taxes. Right. So same thing that applies for FAFSA TAP pathway as it applies on their taxes. And then we'll also ask for the student. So if the student has income and they're a citizen, they're a resident here, we may ask for their filing status and what state they filed in. If the student didn't file, they should say that. If you were in the FAFSA training and TAP training on Friday, Mike Turner said the same thing I've been saying. We see a lot of students that double report their income. They report their parents' income as their own, and that creates a lot of challenges as we go through the income verification process. Then we ask for pension income, where we ask if there's a pension income from that parent, from that spouse, or from the student or adoptive parent. If there is, they should select that and add that into the income calculation. Students should be aware that even here, IRA distributions, pension incomes, unemployment compensation, all that is a piece of the income calculation that is all brought in. So students may say, my parents only made $50,000 this year, or they say $30,000 this year. But then they had unemployment compensation. They had maybe an IRA distribution to do some things in the house. They may have gotten an inheritance. They may have sold a home. All those things, if they did that in the tax you're looking at, will impact their income calculation. Sometimes students are ineligible for that year because, I actually have a friend whose daughter started school this year. His mom passed away in Texas a couple years ago, and on the tax return is the inheritance and the sale of the home from the mom. So he's like, can I get this off? I said, no, you can't this year. Next year, your daughter will be eligible, right? If your income stays around the same, that stuff is wiped away next year. It's not part of the calculation, and you get to go. But for that year, you're kind of stuck. And I'm not sure about you guys, but I've seen quite a few students whose parents are in that situation, especially in regards to like inheritances and things like that. Now we ask for other family members in college, right? If there are other family members in the household, including parents that are attending college, they should include that here. And then supporting documents. If there are any documents that we need from the student, we're going to have them there. Anything that's required is going to be in red, but you see right here, the student could submit their 23 tax return, but that's not a required document. We will find that during the income verification process. But if they didn't have that, they have some other required documentation, we would see that there, and they would have to upload that documentation to us using the information that we have for upload instructions. Once again, I'm preaching this a lot. I love my iPhone. I've been using iPhone for a long time. I'm not an Android guy. I'm an iPhone guy. Love it. The only drawback here is the file format is an HEIC file. So a lot of students are using iPhones and iPads to do things. And I've seen it on drop-ins, and then they're wondering why we don't get this documentation. They send it through an iPhone. They send an iPhone picture to us. They didn't send a PDF. They did not send any of those file types that we asked for. And it says sent, but our system cannot read it, right? So they may have uploaded it, but our system cannot read it. Our emails cannot read it. We literally cannot open those file types, all right? So make sure they are aware of that when they upload documents to us. So that's the sign documentation. So they either e-sign the application or provide a signature page for them and for their parents to review their financial information. Now, the question that we get a lot is, how do I fix that, right? How do I fix anything that's on my application that's incorrect? How can I fix this application? The only way to fix an application is through the nysdream@applyists.com email. When they do that, they should include which application needs to be updated, the information, and then that needs to be updated, and any documentation that might verify that. ISTS may reply with the information being already updated or with needing additional documentation to verify whatever the issue is. Now, students may contact us. They may try to contact us or go into a drop-in event to contact us. But the reality is we don't even see this application until it's approved and completed and accepted. And then our call center staff or outreach team may be able to help with that. Well, more call center, outreach team can't really help with that. But we don't even see that, right? So if the application is still in process, they have to go through ISTS. The people at HESC do not have access to those applications and cannot view those applications. So make sure they know where the email address. They can get guidance from our drop-in events. They can get guidance from our call center, but when it comes to actually making changes on these, we cannot do that on our end. They have to go through the call center.